Are there other tactical things like that that practice owners should be thinking about as it relates to these next 2 years of the changes that we're going to see?
A lot of this is, unfortunately ends up side of desk. And so there is this kind of, I don't want to say knowledge gap, but I see it as, and translate this maybe after I say it as you see it. There's an imperative at this point in my mind to better grasp how you can demonstrate your a therapist therapy organization's value to third party payers in the language that they speak. Our language, the therapy language, the way we talk about our data and our research is all completely valid and valuable. However, if we're not speaking the language of those who are in a position to shift how dollars are spent, we're going down a different path. Right. There's many paths that outpatient practices can take and lots of things that they can do besides this. But I would argue that we're in a place that if you want to be someone who cares for the population, on top of having, many different other things that you do as an outpatient practice, and therapists, I think, have superpowers and can have, you know, practices that can do a whole bunch of things. But if you want to care for the population and you want to still be considered mainstream medical providers, and I think we have to really think that in my mind is a very important component of what therapists sign up for. We're not acupuncturists, we're not massage therapists, we're not and all respect for chiropractors, but we are the mainstream rehab providers. And we don't want to, in my mind, lose that. So if the rest of the mainstream medical providers are learning how, and various stages, some haven't started yet, but if they're learning how to work as a partner with payers, as a partner with anyone taking financial risk, right, another provider type, then we have to be also. That's my big argument to the therapy community is just, I'm not negating all the other awesome things that you're doing, and this profession can go a lot of different ways. But if we are mainstream medical providers who care for patients all along the continuum of care, we have to be able to sit at those tables and have those same conversations in the same way and understand the data that the providers themselves, the physician providers, are looking at, and understand what the payers are looking at. I'll tell you one little vignette from the National Association of ACOs conference. I went to the pre-conference on Medicare Advantage, and it was fantastic. They did a wonderful job, and it was on Medicare Advantage risk, right? So lots of providers are already in fee-for-service programs like the Medicare Shared Savings Program, but they want all of their payers to be value-based payers. So they want to get into contracts. If I'm Mr. Smith's, primary care practice, Dr. Smith's primary care practice, I want to have my Medicare, my Medicare Advantage, all the different Medicare Advantage plans, and my commercial all in at risk, because I know that I'm making more money when I get into these contracts. So they don't know how to do it with MA because their playbook isn't there like it is in fee for service. So they brought MA providers to the table to kind of explain some of the ways that they think about this generally. No one is going to give away their secret sauce. We just have to try to understand how they're thinking, right? And one of the payers said something that just will always stick with me. He said, there's two kinds of providers. 95% are hagglers and 5% are collaborators. And when we get a collaborator, we know in 5 minutes that we have a collaborator, and we figure out what metrics we can work on in a contract to get them started that are going to help us and are going to help them, because payers and providers should be on the same page. They're not funding. They're not the funders, right? They're the payers. Payers and providers can come up with ways that those providers in the contract are helping reduce the unnecessary spend. Payers keep more, and those providers at risk keep more, and they win. Right. Not everyone can win. Right. The inpatient sites of care, if this works, and it is working, but if it keeps building, inpatient sites of care are going to lose some of their dollars. It's just the way the math only works a number of ways, right? So going back to your original question, I want to create the imperative in your listeners and therapists' minds that we don't have an option. The money is going to those that are willing to take risk, payers and providers. And we have to know at least the way the conversations happen, the way they look at the data to find their opportunities, and then have constructive conversations to get into these alternative arrangements. And there are just so many different ways that you can offer to a willing payer, not the regular contract payer, not the one you're sitting with, yearly for 5 minutes and signing on the dotted line, the value-based network contracting part of that payer. And you're benefiting. We have to benefit from this while it's happening, because it's just going to go by the wayside otherwise.
If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.